Wowzers, almost dropped my phone. So I had shared a video with a couple people. I don't even recollect everyone who I sent it to. It was called Samadhi, the movie, part 1. And I shared that because when I watched it for the first time, it was very much like having a piece of my past completely explained to me. And it was a very powerful moment for me. Because it was describing something I experienced in the presence of my teacher for the first time down there when I was about 21 years old. When I was down in Mexico. And what was so interesting to me of watching that, and I've never heard that word before, samadhi. I've never, obviously I was aware of, the term enlightenment, nirvana, this and that from various readings of Buddhist literature, reading of Yogananda, but honestly I didn't remember any of it, quite honestly. And even when I was down with my teacher in Mexico, I was not following any particular discipline. I just kind of integrated many things I've read and just, held close to my heart various teachings from this, that, or the other thing that just came across my path. I wasn't pursuing any particular yoga like Yogananda was. He was a disciple of the Kriya Yoga. And by yoga, I'm not talking about the physical exercises that have become so mainstream here in America. The true original yoga has nothing to do with physical movements per se. It's a yoga, it's an inner yoga. A yoga that incorporates your whole being, not so much going from this posture to that posture, and what Americans have kind of bastardized as some kind of other physical discipline. But what was interesting was reflecting on, for me anyway, it was reflecting on what was being conveyed in the Samadhi movie and what I had experienced with my teacher and what I called my first breakthrough that completely transfigured my life. And to briefly describe it, and I think the Samadhi movie, I'm not remembering exactly, but I think they touched upon this, is that it was like being completely reborn when I came back to the physical body. And I remember just the sensations of being back in the physical body were so foreign, and it felt kind of gross, honestly, dense, and but at the same time extremely remarkable. It was like being reborn, like an adult baby, honestly. It's like, oh my God, I have a full-grown body. And I remember just touching things, like the chair I was sitting in, and looking at the trees and everything. I was just tenderly touching the plastics, the metals, my clothing, as if I was experiencing all this for the very first time. And it was such a fascination, because it was no longer like me touching things. It was as if I was experiencing myself, the physicality for the very first time, but without ownership. There was no more, I don't know, it was just seeing everything different for the first time. And that was my first experience of utter non-duality. And the breathtaking beauty of it. Because it's not like this and that. Everything's not this and that anymore. It has become me. Everything was me. Including my teacher sitting next to me. He was just an extension of myself. And it took me, I don't know, 30 minutes or so of sitting like that. And it was kind of about the time for food. And I remember that we were walking to the restaurant, and yet I was so satisfied on every single level. Utter satisfaction. Completeness. And I remarked to him saying, I don't think I can ever eat food again. As my mind was kind of coming to terms with that this was my physicality, this was my main place of being, was back in the body at the moment. And I remarked to him that I never thought I would have to eat food again, or could eat food again, because there was no desire. I felt so complete. And we walked into the little restaurant, and I was just staring at the menu for the longest time going, what am I even doing? What is this? And I was touching the silverware, the forks, and the knives, and the spoons, and the napkin, and the table covering. Just astounded, like taking it in. And when the waitress came to take our order, all I could say was, I'll have the same as him. And then the food came, and that was just something else too. It's like, I looked at it and smelt it and tasted it. And then the explosion of flavor in my mouth of just a potato with a little bit of ketchup on it was almost too much. And I couldn't even imagine. Like, I savored that single tiny potato in my mouth forever, thinking that was sufficient, food for the day. But yeah, I remember my benefactor saying to me that it will pass. And unfortunately, he was correct, that that utter satisfaction would pass. But the power of that moment would change the course of my life forever. And I didn't really realize until I had watched the Samadhi movie what it was I had actually experienced. I never had these conversations with my teacher. Funny enough, we just communicated on a totally different level. I only spoke with him if I needed to know something for more forward progress. That was it. I mean, at a point. That was after a certain point. That's how it was. And I never asked him, what did I just experience? I think obviously he knew what I experienced just based upon his reactions to things I said. He knew exactly what I experienced. But being down there with him, there wasn't a goal to attain this thing. Everything was just organic. There was no particular discipline being followed or discussed. The only book he ever showed me was The Course in Miracles, which is the one he used to obtain his freedom. And that was it. And there's no particular discipline in the Course in Miracles other than the discipline of introspection to the point where you reassess every single thought and memory and feeling that courses through you and try to put it in the proper perspective, the right order, see it correctly, see it through the lens of truth for what it is, and then let it go. Let it all be forgiven and dissolved. That was my yoga in his presence. And it continues to be my yoga to this day. It's a very organic thing. It doesn't have a name. And obviously I find great harmony in integrating the lessons that psilocybin brings together with that very organic yoga of the heart. So I'm just sharing this because I would like others to see that Samadhi movie. It says a lot. And the reason why I was so touched by it was the person who was narrating it either was the most amazing parroter of this information I've ever seen. Someone who was literally just consuming books and teachings by various individuals and then, regurgitating it on video. Or this person who produced that video was truly an individual who had experienced samadhi and was actually capable of such a profound and beautiful expression of it on that video. And there's an extremely high production value in the video. Obviously, he has I'm making an assumption he has a team of individuals that helped produce that video. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe it was a single individual who not only narrated, but then had the necessary skills to put that production value in place, the visualizations and all the editing and thousands of images that were part of that hour-and-a-half long production. So whatever the case, my heart goes out to the individual or those individuals who produced that, because it put into perspective a very profound piece of my past and my present, really, because it still affects me to this day. It is still being integrated. The experience of samadhi is continuously growing to be a daily facet of experience. Hopefully to the point, this is the way I feel, is that it's slowly becoming a constant, an absolute constant state of mind, which I think is the ultimate goal, where one can be in that state almost always in their daily functions, their family life, their work, their service to life, whatever it may be, that they're constantly in this state of samadhi. I believe that to be the ultimate goal. Where you no longer see anything separate from yourself. Every interaction can be precious. And I want to say again, and I've said this in my other videos, that, you know, psilocybin is not a necessary component. It wasn't a factor at all in the highest moments of my life. It has been a non-factor. I didn't use any substances for most of my life. That's just a recent addition, and it's more for educational and exploratory value. But I am finding great functionality in it. And I think anybody could find benefit from it, honestly. Especially those with a pre-existing discipline who have made efforts to clean house, you know, as I've said so many times. Those who make effort to clean house, those who make the effort to truly know themselves, know their potential, try to incorporate that more fully in every aspect of their life, try to live it, communicate it with others. Those individuals, I think, will have the most benefit from psilocybin, because and the reason why I'm more interested in psilocybin than any other, oh, look at here. I don't have any gifts for you, buddy. I'm sorry. But you're welcome to hang out if you'd like. Would you like just to hang out? All right. Oh my gosh. Now I have a very large spider that was just crawling on my shoulder. Can you see that? Oh, okay. I think he just dropped down from the tree from above. Got all kinds of visitors right now. Anyway, so, you know, maybe I'll walk a little bit. So the reason why I think psilocybin, and fungi in particular, is one of the most beneficial molecules for mankind, not that I've tried them all, but I've paid attention to what others have shared about them. You know, ayahuasca, peyote, obviously I've done, LSD I've done, there's so many others, but the main thing is that it seems to have zero harm, right, to the physical body. There seems to be no negative side effects. It's self-regulating, like I've said before, where if you try to take too much, you will not do that again. It's non-addicting, and it seems to have so far-reaching positive effects for people. Those with no traumas, obviously, like myself, I have no traumas. I'm literally just using it for ever increasing, you know, frequency modulation, I guess is the right term, just to ever increase one's frequency. But for others, oh, that's another aspect I want to discuss, is that it seems to me like psilocybin will do for a person what needs to be done. Like there's an intelligence in it. I've commented on that before, because people have all kinds of different effects, right? Everybody's effects are different. It's very dependent upon one's consciousness and one's frequency, what can be done. And it's very independent of anything else. So what I experience is maybe most likely not going to be what another person experiences, but people get what they need. That's what I'm trying to say. People get what they need from it. There's an intelligence in it. I think it modulates itself depending upon the needs of the individual. So that is a fascinating component of it. But will science ever say anything about that? You know, will the psychologists or psychiatrists and those in clinical settings ever discuss those things about it? I don't know if they'll ever come to that revelation. I'm not even sure how much they are dosing themselves to understand the effects, or they're literally just going upon the, you know, the communications with their patients and how they're how they're discerning what's going on is by that method. But really it needs to be done through personal experience. That is paramount from my perspective. Where else was I going to go with that? Oh, so the other aspect, which I kind of communicated in my last video and other videos, is that the fungi itself is so fascinating to me, because as other mycologists like Paul Stamets and others have said, that it is, as far as DNA is concerned, the closest relative of us. We have more in common DNA-wise with fungi than any other living thing on this planet, which honestly to me says something. And the fact from my personal experience of feeling the ancient knowledge that is contained within the psilocybin molecule, or just the frequency of this being that psilocybin is, as it works with humanity, it starts to release and guide individuals in their own way. And there is so much history in the fungi. It has been on this planet for billions of years. It has seen everything mankind has done. And that is a record. Just, you know, whether it's the fungi or that is containing that, or the fungi is giving access to that record, you know, it doesn't really matter which it is, but one can start accessing that knowledge bank, with or without psilocybin. Don't get me wrong. One can access that information with or without psilocybin as one's frequency is raised and attuned higher and higher. That's a natural unlocking of more and more knowledge. Each of our personal frequencies is the mechanism in itself that unlocks our path. Our personal frequency is what unlocks our path. So if people just stay stagnant and don't increase their consciousness or their understanding of their consciousness, we don't really increase our consciousness, but we're basically unlocking more of our own potential. The potential is absolute, is unchanging. It has been forever. We just peel back the layers of the onion that we have self-imposed upon it. You know, we have self-imposed through lifetimes of misuse of our free will, a veil of our own making, right? And that's what's so interesting, is that we can be free anytime we want. The amount of veil that gets removed is entirely determined by our own sincerity, by our own efforts, and that is the absolute justice of life. You know, we can live in hell in this embodiment, or we can live in stunning beauty and freedom, you know, from an internal sense. Because sometimes life and all the other beings within this classroom can impose things upon us, you know, from time to time. That's not necessarily part of our own particular journey, because all life has free will. We're all human life, because we are the embryos of the great Creator. We are the children. And the laws that humans make that have no bearing on reality most of the time can sometimes be imposed upon us in a not so pleasant manner. But notwithstanding that, one can even, I mean, look at Jesus's life. You know, it wasn't his karma that called upon him to have to go through what for most would be a traumatizing experience of being executed in the most humiliating manner probably known to life. Right? That was not his karma. That was something that was imposed upon him by other children of God through their use of their free will. So, I'm just using that as an extreme example. But I'm going down a tangent now, so let me circle back to why I think psilocybin is, you know, so far, I think the most important molecule for mankind from other aspects is that, unlike ayahuasca, it's very, very gentle on the body. Ayahuasca and mescaline, peyote, in particular, I'm sure there's others. I believe ibogaine, possibly, from what I've heard. They're very traumatic, or can be, to the body, meaning there's vomiting, there's diarrhea, there's a lot of unease in the physical body during the process of the body assimilating the molecule in the form that those particular plant varieties bring. So that's what's different about psilocybin is, and I don't know if that's because of, you know, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to theorize on why that is, but I'm just going to emphasize the fact that that is why I'm a proponent of this more than others. And of course, LSD and MDMA, they both have their place from what, you know, science is showing and the clinical studies are showing. In fact, MDMA might be made legal for clinical settings sooner than psilocybin, from the way things are going. And that is a synthesized molecule, right? It's laboratory made. And so, and there's nothing wrong with that. Oh, look at here. Look at here. That's, if you can see these beautiful mushrooms here. I'm not sure this variety, but I'll stand here a moment and enjoy their presence with me. So synthesized things like LSD, MDMA, they're highly beneficial from seeming, you know, historical uses. But I don't know, I have more of an affinity to something that has been produced by nature. I feel like some of my experiences with psilocybin have literally been with the individual being. This is like a nature being whose sole purpose is to cultivate this particular variety of mushroom. And there's been, I think, three individual circumstances of me having a conversation and exchange a beautiful exchange with these individual beings of that particular variety of mushroom. And I don't know if that's going to be true for MDMA or synthesized laboratory-made molecules. So, I know, to me, there's something to that, right? Like, something that comes straight from the earth and the ground, and something that seems so ancient and so in alignment with our human DNA. It just kind of resonates with me a lot. So, I don't know, did I touch on everything? I don't know. I've kind of gone on a variety of topics, starting with Samadhi movie and watching that, how it affected me, and talking about psilocybin now. I think there was another thing I was going to touch on. Oh, yes, that was it. So, you know, my earliest experience with studying Buddhism and the Tao, which was one of my favorites back in the day, was that there was no real discussion about what happens after Samadhi. What happens when, or what does one do once they've had that? What does one do with their life? Because that sets everything, that changes everything when that experience happens. Nothing will be the same in one's life after they've had Samadhi or experienced Samadhi. It's literally being reborn, and you are never the same person again. There's never going back to who you were pre-Samadhi. It's impossible, because something has changed so profoundly in the consciousness that distinction between the things we see out, you know, with our eyes and what we sense with the body no longer feels separate ever again. And through the 28 years it's been since my first experience of that, it's been growing more and more. And quite honestly, this last 13 months utilizing psilocybin, as I was sharing with a friend of mine, that it feels like being quickened, like the integration of things is happening at a faster and faster rate. And I'm just going to attribute that to the frequency mechanism of psilocybin, that it just raises everything, and it just boom, just takes you right there, right on the come up phase. It just raises you, and the more a person just harmonizes with that escalation of frequency and surrenders to it, they just integrate to it. At least that's been my experience. And it's just been, every time I do it, I just hit a different level and just maintain, different level, maintain, higher level, maintain, to the point where I can scale back my use of psilocybin dramatically, as I was saying, and still just be catapulted into a beautiful higher state where the flood of knowledge and information and discipline tweaks just flood in from my personal use. And I'm going to make the assumption that can be true for anybody. I mean, why wouldn't it? It works for one, and it should work for others. Of course, my particular circumstances are independent of, you know, everybody else's experience, and whatever. But at some point, everything is just frequency. At some point, when you break through enough of your personal bullshit and enter into a state of general equanimity, just a basic state of equanimity where you're good, right? You're just even keeled. You have a clear head. And you're quiet inside enough to, and introspective. There's a stillness and an introspection that is almost ceaseless, where one pays attention to the energy exchange of life way more than the solid aspects of life, you know, or the words. You're paying attention to the energy in the words more than the words themselves. And you're paying attention more to the exchange of energy with the trees and the grass I'm walking with now. Like, you just feel those things. And the sky, it just feels so much more connected at all times than something that's separate from oneself. So and that just grows. It's like the first experience of samadhi, as I was sharing with my friend, was like the seed popping through the soil with its first shoots. And I was just sharing with her, I told her I feel like I'm a young tree now with the first blossoms of a flower appearing on the branches, you know, like a young tree. Through these last 28 years, it has grown and grown and grown and grown. This little seed that sprouted from my first breakthrough to, I feel like fruits are soon to be born, you know. So I'm just sharing that. I don't know if that's helpful or even minorly inspiring anybody else. You know, it is what it is. So if anybody has any use from that, you know, my blessings go to you. But for the most part, one of the things I struggled with after having that experience was, what do I do now? You know, I had my living representation of my personal teacher, right? Here's a man who has almost zero possessions, has like 2 pairs of clothing. No, he doesn't even own a pair of shoes. You know, from the visual perspective, he looks completely unkept. I mean, you know, long hair. He looks basically like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, but with torn Levi's, walking barefoot through dirty streets of Palenque, Mexico. And most people would avoid him, right? Most people would just walk to the other side if they saw him coming down the street, because he looks like a homeless person. You know, and yet he was capable of manipulating the physical world right before my eyes if circumstances required it. You know, that's called a miraculous power. But then you have the juxtaposition of him just looking like, you know, like he did. And I'm thinking about myself going, is this my path? Is this my path? Do I just renounce everything from this point on? And I pondered that for a few days, trying to figure out my place in the world after this, you know, monumental event in my life. And I felt like there was a piece missing. I really, really felt like there was a piece missing, like there's still more information that was going to come to me. And it was shortly thereafter that I departed from his presence. And I just knew I had to be out on my own, not only because there's so much flooding into me, I just had to integrate and process everything that happened. And I felt like my cup was so full that I couldn't even think of being in his presence any longer, which is surprising because he was extremely gracious, extremely high individual. I mean, every word out of his mouth had purpose, and there was no idle chatter ever. He didn't talk about himself or his past. I mean, I had to drag everything out of him, any tidbit about his life and journey. And after a while, I just stopped prying, right? I just stopped prying. I was living in the present moment and just being in his presence, and trying to make the most of it. So that just felt much more proper than trying to pry into an individual's past. So anyway, he was an exemplary human being on the inner, right? But the outer looked like something like a homeless person. So, but any which way, that's just surface. I saw right through that the moment I met him. I just knew this person had a place in my life. I saw right through the physical into his heart the very moment I sat in his presence. That's how powerful emanation this gentleman exuded. And it certainly lifted my entire journey tremendously, spending that short amount of time with him. There's no doubt about that. I mean, just as I say, frequency can be lifted by many things, not only by physical interaction with somebody who's much higher, a much higher emanation of light than we are, but certain molecules can assist with that too. And there's a lot of molecules in life that will also degrade our expression, our frequency, and those are all kinds of various foods can degrade our frequency. Thoughts, I mean, the words and thoughts that we use degrade our frequency every single day or enrich it. But you know, a large portion of mankind is using imperfect feeling and expression constantly. I mean, every word, every thought, every feeling that courses through our being on a daily basis, that is not perfection. That is not a perfect expression of harmony and love and gratitude and joy. Think about what I'm saying. Everything that is not that is a degradation to our being. So we have a lot of work to do to root all that out. That is the yoga. Is the rooting out of everything that is holding us back from the full expression of the highest frequency we can be. And as I said before, our frequency is literally the key of what we can tap into. And just look around you at anybody in life. Look at those expressions of life that are so depraved. Like these drug-riddled homeless individuals who are barely holding on to reality. they are so depraved in their energetic expression that they can't even have access anymore, because the higher understanding and expression of life is locked. It gets locked to them, and they have to work their way out of that. And no amount of, physical services of goodwill, like, giving people money or giving people clothes or giving people anything, helps them. It is a consciousness thing that has to change. And that only comes through education. Now, I'm not talking about university or school education. I'm talking, proper education. Personal education, a lifelong journey of educating oneself about the proper knowledge and useful information that needs to be integrated and expressed every single moment of every day. So, I know I'm going down a long, windy road today, aren't I? But I hope it's enjoyable or useful. I'm just walking through the park, just flowing as much as I can today. I love discussing these things. It just makes me feel so alive when I can just speak freely about these things. It really makes me feel alive. Because it just feels like something's just pouring through me from elsewhere, And because I don't claim ownership of this. I don't, I'm not here making these videos because I'm trying to, sound like some transcendental teacher. That's not my purpose. I don't have any ulterior motives. I'm not seeking fame or advertising revenue on YouTube. That kind of disgusts me, quite honestly. It's like being a prostitute, One should never profit from dissemination of the highest things of the light that they can offer or convey, right? It's just improper. Like my teacher, like for him to charge students or something ridiculous like that would be such... It'd be an absolute disgrace. And quite honestly, that would cause him to be shut out by the light. There is a very fine line. The light will not allow it to be prostituted. The highest forms of dissemination have to become free from a person's heart, because if their intentions change, they no longer become worthy of a further progress in that embodiment. Unless they change, of course. They can make a correction, a course correction. But it has to come free from the heart. Because one who speaks freely from the heart is literally just tapping into. It's like, a maple tree, like getting syrup. They just put a tap into the vein of the tree and let the goodness pour forth. That's all it is for anybody. It's what it is for me right now, just walking through the park and talking. My tap was put into the tree this morning. And it's wonderful. So, You know, that's another thing about the frequency is, you know, we have to make ourselves worthy of the frequency we receive. It will give us a little taste of something. It will give us the next little morsel on our path. And depending on how we utilize that and incorporate that morsel, tells universe, okay, he's ready for more. He's ready for more. And it leads us home of its own accord. Once we walk the path, it leads us home of its own accord. The struggle is gone. Like, I know I am so clearly on the path. I have no struggle. I'm not worried at all. Like, early on in my life, it felt like a struggle. Now, there is no struggle. It is just enjoying the scenery on the way home. And trying to communicate and talk and share and, you know, join hands with others on the way home. That's it. That's it. That is like my purpose in life now, is to find others who might benefit from what I'm sharing. That's all we can do. And then those individuals can share something that helps somebody else on the path, you know. Every teacher lifts those below them, or the students for that matter, such as myself. I'm just a student of the light. And, you know, the person in high school or the person in 12th grade can help lift the person in 11th grade. And the person in 11th grade can help the person in 10th grade. You know, it's a little bit harder when you go too far down, like the high schooler helping the 5th grader kind of thing. You know, the frequency difference is pretty extreme. You know, and that's why people don't have direct interactions with, you know, the ascended hosts and other high beings that frequently, is because of the frequency, the modulation aspect. One has to raise themselves to a certain degree before the interactions can really happen. Otherwise, it's way too shocking. You know, it can be too extreme, and it can actually be detrimental to somebody to be in the presence of something so profoundly higher than themselves. You know, so there is some subtle aspects to that. Not that we really have to worry about that, but it's not that big of a thing. I mean, it's what I mean is the universe modulates that without our concern. That's what I'm trying to say. All we have to do is be willing. We just have to be willing to seek. I mean, that is the mathematics of life. Seek and you shall find. Ask and it shall be opened unto you. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. Those were mathematical, scientific communications by Jesus. And by mathematical, I'm talking about the fact of it being a frequency. That the process, literally the consciousness entering into a willingness of intention to seek the higher understanding. That internal process of desire is mathematics. That is practical mathematics being applied in one's consciousness, okay? So think about that. That is the mathematics in which I talk about so often. That is the science. Seek and ye shall find is an extremely powerful, teaching from one of the highest individuals that have walked this planet in the service to humanity. It couldn't be more simple. You could teach that to a child. And yet humanity can hardly figure out how to employ that. He said 3 things to get the point across. Seek and you shall find. Ask and it shall be opened unto you. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. Ask and you shall receive. Right? He's getting a point across. That it's that simple. Life is not complex. You know, the moment we desire something, we are at the same time compelling ourselves to become worthy of a worthy recipient of that thing. It goes hand in hand. Do you know what I mean? There's so much that goes on. For a person to create that desire, just to say, okay, I am going to respect the teaching of Jesus, and I'm going to actually listen to what he said and try to emulate that to the best of my ability. Right there, an individual who just went through that simple process and then kicked out of their mind, literally kicked out with effort, everything else that arises at that moment saying, oh, you're not worthy. You can't do that. You silly individual. You silly human. There's no way. You don't have a chance in the world of ever doing what Jesus said, which is, these things I do, ye shall do. And greater things than these shall ye do. That is what he spoke. Not just to the people present, for all history. To comprehend. And that single sentence is so important, because look at what religion. God, sorry. The love on high from him is pouring through me right now. But the point is, had he not spoken those words, that we should be doing the same things and greater things than him, had he not spoken those words, where would the Christian religion, where would people be able to see through the bullshit that Christianity has bastardized of his once living teaching? Because they have turned him into the one and only Son of God. Instead of just a brother on the path, showing us the way. With tremendous fanfare. Going out with a bang, right? I mean, he knew what he was getting himself into. As I said before, years in advance. But my point is this. He said those words so that we would be able to discern through the bullshit that he knew was coming. He knew what mankind would do to his teaching. He left no written works. He had to disseminate the consciousness to his disciples and those around him to the best of his ability. That's all he could do. That's the living teaching. The moment it gets put into books, the moment a religion is built around it, it begins to die. That's just the way it is. People figure out a way to manipulate it. Those who are unworthy of the instruction and the purpose therein manipulate things for profit, for power, for prestige. Because their consciousness is not high enough to understand. He's talking about a kingdom well beyond this physical realm. It is here. The kingdom is here for those who want it. I feel it every day. It courses through me. It courses through me right now. But it is not what's the right word? It is not limited by the degradation we see and we witness in our particular classroom at this time. Degradation of the environment, degradation of the human mind, degradation of politics, of governments, and all the expressions therein that we all know are needing a lot of help. Boy, do they need help. But what it requires is more of humanity to embody a higher frequency. That is the only thing that will ever change the physical representation, the physical outpicturing of the collective human consciousness of the children of God that are now embodied here. It's the only thing that will raise it. Is more and more of humanity doing their homework, waking up, cleaning house. Because everything that we express, every thought, every feeling goes out into the entire world. It does not stop. Every thought we have encircles this entire planet and touches every living being on this planet. It is the way of things. I need to change hands. This arm's a little tired of holding the phone. Every thought, every emanation from us is a vibration, and it touches every other part of life. There is no hiding anything. It is impossible to hide one's feelings and one's thoughts because it reverberates in one's energetic field, even if you don't speak the words. There is no hiding. The universe knows exactly who we are every moment of every day. And everyone we touch with our physical presence, we are either lifting or helping to degrade. So that's something we all need to think about and hopefully take much more serious in our lives, right? I'm hoping you all are with me on this. You know, nothing that we do in this world on the physical level matters that much. Whether we are the trash collector or the president of the United States or, you know, a multi-billionaire, you know, such as Elon Musk doing all these technological things. It does not matter. The value of what we are is equal. The trash collector who has attained samadhi and constantly works on himself or herself to be a living example of the highest teachings that they can accumulate and understand through their unlocking of their frequency and everything else, and disseminations, personal disseminations, if they are on that path, they are greater than the person who owns every physical gem, gold bar, and luxury yacht on this planet. The accumulation of physical expressions of frequency on this planet is meaningless. You know, one of my personal struggle, I'll call it a struggle, sure, why not, has been feeling that with my understanding of life, I should have a much higher expression of physical wealth than I do. And what's really come paramount, well, before I go that far, I'll say I am flooded with ideas, like all the time. Like I have so many business ideas. I am a successful contractor. I make more than I need. But still, I feel like if I had so much more wealth, there's so many things I want to do. There's so many ideas I think would benefit humanity that I want to put into practice. And so I'm like, why isn't this happening? These ideas feel so genuine and so good, right? But what I receive as guidance on these things, I'll share with you. Because most of what I feel, or at least this is from my personal path, right? Everybody's got their own path. My personal path is that less is more. My personal path feels way much more tied to the ascetic lifestyle, meaning that as soon as my daughter becomes of adult age and is on her own path, I'm going back to extreme simplicity. I am doing away with this household of stuff that I've collected. I have, 20 different business ideas and experimentations and hobbies and crafts and so much stuff in the shelves of my office that, including these shirts and stuff I made. I thought I'd make a fun Etsy business, trying to create just shirts and slogans and things, just because stuff just pours in all the time. And I thought that was going to be like something I would do, but in the end it just feels like distraction now. And that's so much clearer to me now, is that my path is going to be something much simpler. I feel much more attuned to having very few things in my life and much less distractions. Like right now, I really feel like just getting rid of everything and going to live a very ascetic lifestyle on a piece of land. I feel like I really want to regenerate, like permaculture, using permaculture values, a nice piece of land. And, pardon me, not a nice piece of land, like a wasteland, like something in the desert, and turn it into a food forest, and try to regenerate the land using, the mechanics of swales and water collection just from rain and runoff and things like that. Just kind of as a stewardship. That's kind of what's strongest in my life. But in conjunction with that, that would just integrate me more of getting out of the busyness I have right now in my life as being a contractor and building people's and renovating people's houses. And juggling crews and subcontractors and all that. That's something I really, really want to simplify. But in conjunction with that, I want to talk about the wealth aspect. And that is, I felt like I should be, like if I was pursuing the normal avenues that everybody would be doing, which is investment and owning a home, and then, you know, selling my business, you know, for profit to somebody, all of that just sounds, it just feels so obscene to me for some reason. Like, I've owned houses, I've built my own houses, and I've sold them all, and I've been renting for the last 10 years because it just feels better to me, honestly. I feel like less of an anchor, less tie-in with all the bullshit of the government and the banking institutions. You know, I don't really create that obstacle out there, like an evil to me. That's not what I feel inside, but I know the difference of feeling tied to lies and deceit and unjust aspects of life that I really want to distance myself from as much as possible. That's what feels wholesome to me personally. So yeah, I don't even know if I can own a piece of land. Even though I've gone out and went looking and shopping for some, it almost feels better to me to just join with somebody else who is capable of being that integrated and just assisting on a project, or bouncing around the world and doing different projects. You know, I'd love to see different things. And see where I can be useful and gather some additional knowledge. Just being out of the States again, I haven't felt like traveling in a long time. I'm starting to feel it again a little bit. I think it's mostly just to get out of my own element, you know, just to get out of all familiar surroundings, because I think that's really beneficial to making rapid progress, is getting away from all one's physical ties to an area.